Hey everybody, this is Darren Van Dam and you are watching Flick Connection, the show that helps you get more out of movies, and today I want to tell you about 20 amazing movies on Netflix that you have probably missed. So this is an eclectic mix. We got quite a broad range of genres. There's also quite a range in quality. So what I'll be doing in this video is spending about a minute per movie for 20 movies, telling you a little bit about it with no spoilers and helping you determine whether or not it might be a right fit for you. So starting all the way back at number 20 on this list, I've got one that could have made maybe a better sci-fi short, but they did manage to stretch it to feature length pretty well in Circle. Now the basic concept for this movie is fairly simple, but it manages to get fairly complex. This is about a bunch of people who wake up in a room and they begin to be eliminated sort of one at a time, and it's a puzzle like Saw or something like that, but this is clearly science fiction. There's like this ray that's sort of zapping people. So it's kind of a silly concept, but the meat and potatoes of this movie is sort of all the sort of interpersonal conflicts and the sort of things that people are trying to figure out as they're trying not to die in this scenario. They're trying to outlast everybody else. It's fairly slow paced because nobody can move. So the movie itself doesn't actually move. You're just sort of spending time in this space with these people. However, when you take that into consideration, it is fairly well done. They managed to make it surprisingly interesting for the sort of like 80-minute run, and then it's got a good conclusion, everything like that. Just a good little sci-fi gem that again feels kind of more like a short or a sketch, and it stretches out, but it does do so pretty well. Now, Noomi Rapace plays a badass, per usual, in Close. Now, she's in several movies on Netflix that I've talked about, including What Happened to Monday, which I think is just a really incredible sci-fi movie that's very underrated, and Close fits in that category too. It's very underrated, but I can kind of see why. It's a little bit slow paced. This is an action movie where she plays sort of like this special forces security agent that's trying to protect a young girl. Again, with a simple concept, something you've seen before, yet Noomi Rapace is really great in this, and while there's not any action in it that's gonna blow your mind, this movie does stay fairly grounded and never felt overly silly or stupid to me, which action movies done sort of at this level in this budget often do feel dumb to me. But Close, again, felt fairly grounded. Just keep in mind, it is slower paced. I think that's probably what has prevented this from being a more well-known movie. However, that said, not taken into consideration, it does have a lot of good qualities that should not have gone overlooked.
If you can't trust your gut, you might as well be in parking enforcement. Holy shit.
Sir, can I quit the force forever, please?
Now, fellow fans of Curb Your Enthusiasm may have missed this next Netflix original movie, Handsome. This actually stars Jeff Garlin as a private detective, and while it doesn't feel exactly like Curb Your Enthusiasm, you can definitely see where Jeff Garlin has learned a lot from the set of Curb Your Enthusiasm. He's been doing that show for a very long time, and there's a little bit of that Curb flavor that gets thrown into this detective comedy movie, because this is not a slapstick, silly, sort of goofy detective movie. It's a little bit more straight-laced. I think even if you're not a fan of Curb Your Enthusiasm, there's a lot to like here, because it's not really based on cringe comedy or anything like that. It's just a nice sort of performance piece from some good, funny people. If that sounds like you, this is a really good watch. It does feel a little bit more like a long TV show episode than an actual movie though, just because it's produced like a TV show. Now, speaking of comedy, fellow fans of Talladega Nights should definitely check out Wheels of Fortune. This is your basic redneck comedy. Most of the jokes revolve around the main characters being sort of ill-informed or just way too excited to be riding dirt bikes and monster trucks, but it does work. I found the characters to be really funny. You'll recognize the main character. He played Badger on Breaking Bad. There's some other good comedy actors in there. This is a small, low-budget movie, but I found a lot of the jokes to be funny in that sort of Ricky Bobby direction. If you did not like Talladega Nights, you don't like the humor in that movie, I don't know that you're gonna like Wheels of Fortune, because it's very, very similar, but just not quite as good. Now we're gonna switch gears with Black 47. This was just recently added to Netflix, and the movie's fairly new. It's only about a year old, and this takes place during the Great Famine in Ireland, and it focuses sort of less on the famine that's sort of happening in the background, and more sort of on this battle. You're dealing with a soldier who has fought for the British Army that is now sort of fighting against, not quite in a revolutionary faction, but there is sort of a revenge element there. Hugo Weaving has a really great role. This one is a little bit dry, but if you like historical dramas at all, this one's great. Don't expect a lot of action, although there are some shootouts and some sort of man-hunting going on in this one. What I'm showing you is sort of the highlights of the action, which is not a problem. It's not a complaint with the movie. Just don't go into this one expecting there to be a lot of that, and I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. If you look at this as a historical drama, which it is, then there's a surprising amount of action in it. Far from my favorite on the list, which is why it's way back here, but still just an excellent movie. Now, switching gears again, one of the weirdest ones on this list is 1BR or One Bedroom. But don't search for One Bedroom. If you're gonna search for it on Netflix, search for 1BR. This one is about a girl who moves into a new building in California, and while everyone seems nice, they maybe seem a little bit too nice, and then she starts to suspect that something weird is going on, and it definitely is, but the surprise is in the movie, and this one does develop itself to be pretty dark. I'm not gonna say too much more than that. If you liked The Invitation, which is another great movie I've recommended I don't know how many times on Netflix over the years, this one is very, very similar in a lot of ways. It's not a rip-off or anything like that, but it's got a lot in common with it. I happen to think The Invitation is way better. If that were on this list, which it's not, I would have put it much higher. However, this is still a good watch. I think fans of that will dig it. Likewise, if you enjoyed 1BR and you've seen it already, definitely hunt down The Invitation as well. Now my next pick is a low-rent gangster flick that actually punches above its weight, considering that it is a low-rent gangster flick, because those movies are a dime a dozen. But Knockaround Guys came out in 2002, and it does still have that 90s vibe that sort of carries over. And that is a good thing in the case of this movie. It works for this movie. In this movie, you're dealing with sort of very low-level, like entry-level mob guys that sort of get knocked around and sort of used to do whatever, and they sort of find themselves in a scenario that they don't really want to be in. Vin Diesel is in this one, and he's worth mentioning because this is one of the few movies I really like him in that is not a big franchise thing. That's really his home, is those big franchise movies, and anytime he tries to step out of that, it tends to not really work. And no, I'm not counting Saving Private Ryan in that. Why? Because I'm willing to bet most of you forgot that he was even in that movie.
It's to my dad. It's got blood on it.
However, he does stand out here. He had a cool role that was very appropriate for him because, in my opinion, he's got a pretty narrow range. It works out. Barry Pepper is one of my favorite character actors. He's got a great role in here, and so does Seth Green. While it's not a great gangster movie, it's a great movie for people who love gangster movies. Now, even though I talked all about the cast and Knockaround Guys, my next pick has one of the coolest ensemble casts on this list. It's called Middlemen. It's got a great cast, including Luke Wilson, Giovanni Ribisi, and Gabriel Macht. They all had these sort of standout characters. Luke Wilson maybe is a little dry, which he normally is, but I do like him in this. Giovanni Ribisi is always fun, and Gabriel Macht is really cool and slick in this movie. And this movie is about the guys who first figured out how to make money online. So it's essentially about the dawn of e-commerce, which is everything now. It's such a huge part of the economy. This is about the dawn of it, and even more interesting, or maybe more titillating, is the way that they figured out how to do it was through porn. It was the first transactions that they're making is porn, and they sort of build this adult entertainment empire, all with things sold through the internet. And so you get a lot of elements. Obviously, there's just a lot of scantily clad women running around, which is always fun to watch. For me, I don't know, I'm weird that way, but also they're just throwing a lot of money around, and this excess is just like a Wolf of Wall Street vibe. And then of course, naturally, things come to a head. They're just desserts or upids or whatever comes around in this one, and it's pretty wild. But if you haven't seen it, you love The Wolf of Wall Street or movies like that, or you just love any of the actors that I talked about, this is a must-see movie.
You got a cell phone?
What do I look like? I'm a businessman. People gotta get a hold of me.
All right, let me get your number.
What for?
In case I need to get a hold of you.
Now, I'm uploading this video in December, but a lot of you will be watching it in the future. However, if you watch this one right away, The Ghost Who Walks is a recently released crime thriller that could be a decent Christmas watch because it does take place at Christmas. There's just sort of happening in the background, but there's a lot of the decorations and stuff. So if you want to watch something that's a little bit heavy, but that has a good Christmas theme to it, check this one out, and you could watch this any time of year as well, because it's not overly Christmas themed. But this is about a guy recently released from prison. He's sort of running around for one night, trying to sort of get his shit together so he can get out of town. And he's got a lot of strings attached. He's got a lot of people he needs to see, and some people that want to see him that he doesn't necessarily want to see, so he's sort of being pursued as well. I'm being vague on purpose, that way you can just experience the movie, but it was created recently. It does have a fresh vibe, but it also has sort of like a throwback vibe that I really enjoyed. It felt like something that could have come out in the 70s. It looks new, but the type of story that it is and the type of characters feels like sort of a lost gem of the 70s or something. I really dug that aspect of it. And then we will round out my bottom 10 with a really interesting movie. And despite there being 0 hummingbirds in this movie, it's titled The Hummingbird Project. This stars Jesse Eisenberg, Alexander Skarsgård, and Salma Hayek in a really interesting story, sort of in the vein of The Big Short. This is about a couple of guys who figured out how to run a fiber wire over hundreds of miles in a straight line. So there's this big engineering project with the sole purpose of engineering it to get them stock market data a millisecond faster than the competition, giving them an edge that could create hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. So they're basically kind of figuring out how to steal money, but it's legal, sort of. And you get this really grand project that Jesse Eisenberg is heading up. There's some great secondary characters. In fact, some of the secondary characters, their performances sort of outpace some of the others. They were really interesting. And it's just got a kind of fun nature to it, while there's also some very, very serious moments. Salma Hayek is great in this. Even though you don't see her much, she really stands out. She's got a very interesting character for her to play. So I was pleasantly surprised by this movie. I did not have many expectations for it, and it's really well done. A really entertaining watch. It's not too heavy, not too crazy, not too dark, just very interesting and well done. Now, before moving on to my top 10, if you live in another country and you're finding that you cannot find all these movies with your Netflix subscription, or maybe you're watching this in the future and they're not available here in the US or whatever country you're in, you can access them using CyberGhost VPN. They are today's sponsor. And like all VPNs, CyberGhost keeps your web browsing secure, keeps it private. But in addition to that, they have engineered specialized servers that allow you to access Netflix in different countries. And they have completely different libraries in different countries available at any given time. So you're gonna unlock a ton of new movies for less than the cost of a rental. Right now, my viewers can pay as low as $2.25 a month. That's less than half the cost of a new movie rental. They also have a 45-day money-back guarantee. So there's virtually no risk. They have great 24/7 customer support if you need help getting it set up on any of your devices. By the way, you can use it on up to 7 different devices at the same time, and it's all the different types of devices you're used to using. So just go to the link in the description, check it out. If you're watching this video at the time of me releasing it, you still have a window to get that $225 price before it goes back up to a minimum of $275. So jump on that deal while you can. And if you missed it, it's still a great deal. It's under $3 a month to access way more movies. It's tough to beat. It's a tough deal to beat, especially if you do utilize it properly. But let's go ahead and move on with the rest of this list.
We gotta get Charlotte out of here.
Roger that.
Once we have the bag secure,
Take them all out.
So my next pick is a somewhat recent release. It's only a couple of years old, and it was just recently added to Netflix. I mean, like the day that I'm launching this video. It's called Braven. And this movie is basically like Cliffhanger with Jason Momoa. He's not really doing any rock climbing in this one, but it does take place out in the snow. It's a decent action movie. Certainly a lower budget than something like Cliffhanger, but still really well executed. Obviously, Jason Momoa is good. He's just good in this type of a movie. But in addition to that, there's a good bad guy, there's some decent violence and some action, and some clever moments as well. This movie's not just loaded with clever moments, but there's plenty of moments where I didn't feel like I was watching something for the second and third time. You know, it's not just rehashing things. In fact, I would say this has the appearance of sort of like a half-ass action movie, which are a dime a dozen everywhere, but especially on Netflix. And it's not. This one is actually really well done because the cast stands out so well and because the creators put some clever things in there to keep you entertained and didn't just sleepwalk through the whole thing. If it looks like you, if this looks like your kind of movie, I can tell you that it definitely is. Now, a handful of the greatest movies ever made are about boxing. And while my next pick is not really gonna stand shoulder to shoulder with any of those great movies, it is a contender. It does sort of hang in there, and it is close. It doesn't just like fade into the background, meaning it's a surprisingly good boxing movie. It's called Bleed for This. Now, this is based on a true story about a boxer who was in a car accident and became paralyzed. He's in the whole halo neck brace thing, and like an animal, really sort of risks his life and begins lifting weights again. Some of those scenes made me cringe so hard, but it really happened. This is a true story, and he was able to sort of train himself back and get back into the ring again at great personal risk. But Miles Teller does a good job. Aaron Eckhart playing his coach is actually really great. He stands out. It's been a while since I feel like I've seen him in anything really good, and he does a good job here. And this is just a good all-around movie. While it does have some upsetting moments, it's got like a good spirit to it, which is pretty common for a boxing movie. But again, even though it's a boxing movie, I didn't feel like it was a repeat of things I'd seen before. It's a different story, and it's about something different than just winning the next fight. It's really about sort of overcoming this disability that he had because of the car accident. It's a pretty amazing story and then just put to screen really well. Now, the only documentary featured on this list features shots better than anything in any of these movies that I'm talking about, despite the fact that there's some great movies in here with some great visuals. The Dawn Wall is about rock climbers, and more specifically about rock climbers climbing the El Capitan Cliff in Yosemite. You may recall the big to-do over Free Solo, a documentary about a guy who actually climbs it with no gear. That's amazing. The Dawn Wall came out sooner, and it's about a group of guys who are trying to do it without falling. Like a video game, whenever they fall, they have to go back to the last checkpoint. They are using gear, but they're doing it without really the assistance of that gear, so they're essentially doing sort of like a free climb with harnesses, but they're doing it on a much more challenging face of the cliff, and it takes months and months of them being up on this wall trying to complete this climb. It's a very different approach. In addition to there just being some really hair-raising moments, as well as some beautiful shots of this rock face with these amazing views of Yosemite National Park. Just a really beautiful documentary with a great story at its heart. Now, fans of martial arts movies or anything like that should not miss my next pick, which definitely flew in under the radar, and that is Shadow. Now, not only does this have some great fight sequences in it, it's got a beautiful, beautiful cinematography and just an amazing look that looks almost like black and white. However, they've just made the sets black and white and gray, so there are some pops of color. You do see blood, you do see some different colors, but it is not a colorful movie. It was filmed almost to look like black and white, except again, it's not. It's filmed with color cameras, and you get this really sort of stunning look out of it. Because of that, it doesn't quite look natural, which is what they were going for, but it totally works. Again, just beautiful with just amazing over-the-top action that serves the story and totally works. Now, while The Dawn Wall had some of the best shots, my next pick is easily the most beautiful movie, and it's also the only animated movie I have on this list. It is called The Song of the Sea. Now, this is based on a Celtic folk tale, and the opening of this, even though it is animated and it is kid-friendly, it is pretty heavy. similar to the way some Pixar movies are pretty heavy. But then you go on this amazing adventure with these incredible visuals. There's a lot of magic elements and mysticism. This movie is a work of art. You can see from what I'm showing you here, it's absolutely beautiful. If that intrigues you and you want to sort of watch sort of the visual feast of this movie, I can tell you the story is even better than the visuals. It really is sort of a masterpiece. This was even nominated for an Academy Award for Best Animated Picture. They didn't win because Pixar always wins, but it is a fantastic movie that is not to be missed. Now, whether you are a Will Ferrell fan or not, this next pick is a crowd pleaser, despite the fact that it's one of the strangest ones on this list. It's called Stranger Than Fiction, and in this, Will Ferrell plays a guy who is being written about. So a famous author is writing a story about a guy, an ordinary man, who is going to die, and Will Ferrell suddenly starts to hear the narration in his head, and it's describing everything that he's doing. So it's a very sort of quirky, odd thing, but there's a very good heart to this movie that really comes out over the course of it. And tonally, this is very different from anything you've seen Will Ferrell in. He's not a goofball, he's not an idiot, he's a very ordinary person who's really sort of struggling with this weird thing with the narration. However, it is funny. He is a great comedic actor, but you're going to see him play a very different character here. And there's some incredible performances, but also just some very smart writing that makes the mechanics of this weird scenario work for this movie. I just felt like this movie hit all the notes it was trying to hit perfectly. It's not trying to do too much, and what it is trying to do, it nails. It's funny, it's heartwarming, it's touching at times, yet always interesting and entertaining. And I could say almost the same thing about my next movie, which was featured on my recent Hulu list. That just dropped, but I know a lot of you don't watch my Hulu list. I will link to it in the description, but I wanted to mention this here as well because it's also on Netflix, and I believe it's also on Prime. So no matter where you watch movies, you can currently watch Hunt for the Wilderpeople. This is from director Taika Waititi, I think is how you pronounce his name. He did Jojo Rabbit, What We Do in the Shadows, Thor Ragnarok. Just an excellent comedy writer, and this is my favorite movie of his. It's about a delinquent young boy in New Zealand who gets paired up with a family that live out on a farm, and he runs away, and it develops into this sort of survival movie. The kid is incredibly charismatic and funny, and he is a rising star. He's in Deadpool 2, he's in the new King Kong movie that's yet to come out. Sam Neill has a really great role in it, and it's got that good sort of Kiwi sense of humor that can only sort of come out of movies from New Zealand. This movie's drenched in it, and I absolutely love it for that. So this next pick is very much like a mix between The Revenant and Lone Survivor. It's based on a true story from World War II. It's called The 12th Man. Now this takes place in Norway, and it is foreign language. You will have to read subtitles. It's well worth the effort, and it's a lot of effort because this is a very long movie. It's almost exhausting because of the nature of it. I felt fatigued watching it, but it's an incredible story about a group of men who were on a mission to try to stop the Nazis, and they were all captured, but one of them, the 12th man, escapes, and it was this incredible story of him sort of surviving freezing cold wilderness. I mean, there are some really intense moments in this movie that are gruesome, but very raw and very real. Kind of important to watch some of that stuff in your lifetime, I think, and this movie really does carry really well. And then you get Jonathan Rhys-Meyers, who is an actor I've always liked, playing sort of this head Nazi hunter, but it's just a harrowing story, very well executed, just not to be missed. They added it recently. Make sure you put it on your list and watch it sometime this winter. Okay, the last list I did like this of 20 sort of underrated movies on Netflix. I'll link to that in the description as well. For those of you watching that are not subscribers yet, you may want to check out some of my additional content, but Uncut Gems was on that list. And if you liked Uncut Gems, you should definitely check out Good Time on Netflix. This is from the same directors, the Safdie brothers. One of them actually stars in it, but the real star of this is Robert Pattinson. He has recently come into his own, starring in movies like Tenet. He's the new Batman, which that trailer looks killer, by the way, but he's very, very good here. And this is sort of a wild, crazy night movie. It takes place in about 24 hours, more or less, and this guy cannot get out of his own way. However, he's also very resourceful and very intelligent, but he keeps making bad decisions. This is sort of what this movie is about, under the skin a little bit. It's also got an incredible look to it. The cinematography's great, the colors pop. It's got a vibe very similar to Uncut Gems, but unlike anything else that I've really seen, and I love what the Safdie brothers are doing. They got this electric sort of fast-paced vibe. I think anyone that liked Uncut Gems is bound to like Good Time as well. And then finally, my number one pick was also just recently added to Netflix. It's called Nocturnal Animals, and this was actually directed by fashion designer Tom Ford, and he did this little Texas thriller. It's sort of a neo-western at times. It's actually two movies at once. There's two things happening at the same time. But Amy Adams is great in it, Jake Gyllenhaal. Michael Shannon has a small role, but he's really great. But the standout show stealer in this one is Jonathan Taylor Thomas. You may recognize him as Kick-Ass. He's been in some great stuff. This is his best performance, bar none. There's no question. He is a bad dude in this one, and he kills it. Everyone does a great job here. This movie has a beautiful look to it. Like I said, Tom Ford is a famous fashion designer. He's really fantastic behind the camera as well. He's an amazing director, and this is just sort of a standout movie. However, it is important to tell you, this is an art film. This is for the art movie crowd. It will appeal to a slightly broader audience than most art movies, but fair warning, the opening title sequence of this movie, you're gonna be wondering, what did Darren recommend? Why did he have me watch this? And by the time you really get halfway into it, you're gonna not be able to stop watching it. Now, if you don't like artsier movies, this may not be for you, but if you generally like my recommendations, I would recommend you hang in with this one, because there is a good payoff and just some incredible performances and visuals along the way. But that's my new list of 20. If you're new here and have not clicked that red subscribe button yet, go ahead and click it. I just recommend movies here on this channel that you can watch on streaming services for the most part. Let's thank the Patreon supporters for supporting yet another video. There are links to Patreon and channel memberships in the description below. Channel members get access to exclusive videos. Patreon supporters get other things. Go check out those links, see if that's a good way for you to support the show. But liking, commenting, sharing always helps support the show as well. And your support is appreciated however you wish to give it, but I will keep making videos like this one as long as you keep watching them. Thanks for watching one of my final videos of 2020, and you will see me on the next one.